about it a little bit, yeah. Yeah, Berlin did talk to me. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Mayor's Monthly Update. This is a new adventure for me, and we are hoping to have this on a monthly basis. And the purpose, basically, of the update or briefing, as it is to explain to the citizens in the community what exactly the city staff might be working on, what the council's working on, and then to also report on upcoming projects that we might be involved in as well. And also, the third purpose, would be to have a special guest. And you can see that to my right is Brian Weave, who has agreed to become the first guest of the Mayor's Update. And we'll be talking to Brian a little bit later on here as we move forward. First of all, people ask me, how are things going? And basically, what I tell them is, well, after 27 days, excellent. So people have been very, very good to me in terms of getting started off on the right foot in terms of mayoral duties. And I think in large part, that is due to the transition period from November 2nd, the election day, and January 1st is when I took office. And I have to say that the transition was very smooth. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that transition time. First of all, I have to give a lot of credit to Kevin Robinson, the former mayor. Kevin invited me to be a part of every meeting that he was involved in. And I think that had a great deal of impact with regard to how I was able to see what the issues were facing the city from the inside, and also to just be updated and more cognizant of what's going on. I also think that having 15 years on the city council of experience helped me a great deal. I think that I understand city government, but the issues that are facing the city now and what they were 2 years ago when I was off the council are a little bit different. But I understand the issues. I understand the process of how the issues have to work through city staff and the council and committees and so forth. So I also think that city staff, I have to really give them a shout out because they helped me. I've known many of the city staff over the years, and I was comfortable talking to them, and they were helpful to me in explaining the phone system, for example. That's changed, and all of those kind of things, and emails, and those kind of things, just the little things that you need in order to operate. I also have to thank the department heads for making the transition easier as well. Again, I've known several of the department heads over the years. We've had a good working relationship for several years, and I don't see that we are not going to have a good working relationship in the years to come. So also, I think during that transition period, I mentioned the meetings that I was involved in. There were a lot of committee meetings that I was involved in with regard to various issues that the city is facing, economic development meetings, department head meetings, and agenda meetings. And I want to just make a short comment with regard to agenda meetings. The agenda meetings are basically usually held on the Wednesday prior to the city council meeting. And we generally have the city clerk, the city attorney, the city manager, finance director, and any department heads who might have issues coming up before the council on the next meeting. And we talk about what the agenda is going to be. And it's up to the city clerk basically to outline what the meeting is going to look like. And then if there are things that need to be pulled from that meeting, or if we feel that there needs to be more discussion or conversation about something, it can be pulled at that time. And there might be some things that we need to add to the meeting as well. So those are very, very important meetings, and I was involved in those in, I think, the last one in November perhaps, and then both of them in December. So those are very, very important meetings to understand the background of the issues that are facing the council. Also during that transition period, it was a time for me to reach out to the present city council and also to Councilman Balk, who is a new member of the council. And we had some individual conversations with regard to basically the committee structure, because the committee structure changed from the time I was on the council. There are now 7 committees. Each member of the council is a chair of a committee, and they also serve on 2 other committees. So I wanted to find out from each member of the council whether or not they were comfortable with that committee structure, whether they were comfortable with chairing the committee that they happened to chair, whether they were comfortable with the committees that they were serving on. And then we also talked a little bit about any issues, any pressing issues that they felt that the council needed to address. So there were some very, very productive conversations. And then I also wanted to, had to appoint a mayor pro tem. And I was very happy that Bill Orison, who I have served with on previous councils, agreed to be the mayor pro tem. And looking forward and have enjoyed Bill's counsel over the years, but I think that Bill has a vast amount of experience. He has a great knowledge of the city and economic development and finance, and I think he's going to do an outstanding job as mayor pro tem. So then Christmas came, and things are starting to get a little bit real in terms of finally taking over. So first of all, I had to prep for the first city council meeting. And I've been to, I think I counted it up, something like almost 400 city council meetings in my life. And I don't know how many committee meetings and things like that. But it was very different moving into the mayor's chair. Same kind of meetings, just different chair, different responsibilities. So I have Teresa Reardon to really thank. She's the city clerk. And Teresa did an outstanding job of helping me prepare for the city council meetings. And I think she will going forward as well. But there were lots of questions that I had, and she was able to answer them and make sure that I was thoroughly prepared for that first council meeting. So, you know, what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about what has been going on in January in terms of myself and also with regard to the city council. Personally, I've been very busy with city business, and I don't know if this is going to continue to be this busy or not. I'm not quite sure, but I counted it up today, and on my calendar, and I think I have everything on my calendar, I've been to, including the 2 city council meetings, 21 different meetings over the course of the first 27 days in January. So those are not all city meetings. A lot of these meetings are with various groups within the community as well. But there's a lot of meetings that I've been to, and you know, basically what I say is that there's never a meeting that I go to that I don't learn something. And boy, I tell you, if you go to a meeting and you don't learn something, you're in big trouble, or you're not listening or paying attention or something. So anyway, what we've been working on in January, I'd like to do that, and then give a little brief on what's coming up in February. So In January, a few of the things that have gone on. First of all, I think something of very much importance to the entire community is there's been a lot of discussion about the city closing 11th Street for the hospital expansion. The hospital wants to expand their emergency room, and in order to do that, they felt that the best way that they could provide the service to the community was for them to expand over on 11th Street, which would require the city to vacate 11th Street. I believe that that process is a very difficult process. Anytime you close a city street, very, very difficult process, and I think that City Council did a nice job vetting that entire process, allowing community members and stakeholders to have input in that. And we're still not quite done with it, even though we did have a final filing with regard to vacating the street. But we still have to have a clarifying agreement with the hospital that everything is tied up with regard to easements, with utilities, and so forth. But getting back to the hospital and their expansion, I'm old enough to remember 50 years ago, and actually 60 years ago, what the hospital was. And it was basically just one, actually fairly small building. And to see the expansion of that hospital over the decades has been pretty amazing. And I think for Spencer to be a vibrant community and basically the focal center of Northwest Iowa, we have to have a vibrant healthcare community. And I think that even though this is painful, this closing of the street is a painful thing for a lot of people, I think that in order for us to continue to be a regional healthcare center, this was a needed project. Secondly, we passed an ordinance with regard to custom meat businesses. And there was an individual who was wanting to come in and have a meat processing facility, and we really didn't have a way to do that. Well, this started back in the fall, I believe, and this is kind of in conjunction with what the state and the federal government are trying to encourage small meat processing centers, and the City Council and P&Z did a nice job, I think, in getting this ordinance through, and hopefully we're going to see that come to fruition in the near future. Third thing I'd like to touch on is we did have, and not unexpectedly, in January, a major snow event. Depending on who you ask, we got between 10 and 12 or 13 inches. And regardless, I don't think anybody's quibbling over the amount. But my hats are off to the Public Works Department and the Police Department for the job they do during these snow events. The Public Works folks did an outstanding job, and the police department also did a great job, I think, with that. And I want to also commend the citizens of Spencer. During this snow event, the police department issued under 10 citations for people having their vehicles on the streets. And that is so important for our Public Works Department to do their job to get the vehicles removed. And I remember back when we first enacted the snow ordinance, we've had to tweak it over the years, but sometimes there were 60 or 70 citations that were written, and a couple dozen cars were towed and things of that sort. So this is really, really commendation to the folks in Spencer for following the snow ordinance. Another thing that we did during the month of January is we changed the ordinance with regard to construction permits. And I think that homeowners will probably like this. It was tweaked a little bit, but the biggest thing is you still have to come in if you're going to make an improvement on your property. You still have to come into the city and get a permit. But the thing is, if it's under $1,000, if you're going to make an improvement that's under $1,000, there won't be any cost for the permit. We also hired a new library director after a couple of months search. The city has hired Sarah Beth Redwing Foxen, and many people will probably recognize that name. Sarah Beth has been our children's librarian for several years, and she's a former Spencer High School graduate, and I was pleased to have her as a student, actually. But Sarah Beth, I'm sure, is going to do a great job for us. Another thing that we did at the last council meeting was to approve an overlay project in the St. Luke's area. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but it is to the folks up in the St. Luke's area. The streets up there have been a little bit less than desirable to drive on the last few years, and I think this overlay project is much needed. We also approved a contract with Cruz Caton Nelson to do the engineering work on a sewer project out on 25th Street Southwest and Hagedorn Heights, which is the area along Highway 71. So those are some things that were accomplished during the month of January. Now, coming up in February, we've got a whole host of things that we'll be doing in February. I think first one is we have a goal setting session coming up this next week. We have the city manager, I believe, Mark Jackson from Story City is coming up to facilitate that goal setting session. And it's always important for cities to set goals, to have the elected officials, the department heads come together and set goals and build consensus for what we need to do as a community to move forward. We'll also continue working on the ordinance with regard to food trucks. We had the second filing, and we had some owners of food trucks come in, talk about the proposed ordinance, some concerns that they have with the ordinance. And so what we've done is we've kicked that back to committee. Now, we weren't able to find a time because we're right in the middle of budget season and a bunch of other things going on. We couldn't get that committee meeting set so that we would have that ordinance for final filing on the first meeting in February. But I think we'll probably be able to get that taken care of and have it on the agenda for the second meeting in February. We're hopeful of that. There are some things that the food truck operators brought to our attention, and we're going to look at that. I think they're going to come to the committee meeting and talk about some of those concerns, and hopefully we can come to some resolution on that. We're also going to be working with the park department, or the park department's got some proposals, I should say, with regard to a couple of projects that they'd like to push forward. One is with the Aquatic Center decking, and I just talked briefly to Jared Elbert before we came in today, and we'll see how that project is going to transpire here in the near future. Hopefully we can get that done before the Aquatic Center opens. I think we have to get something done out there before it opens. And also, and I think this is kind of an exciting project that Jared's brought forward, and that's resurfacing the tennis courts at Fairview School. And this would be a collaborative project with the school system. The schools use those tennis courts quite a bit, and then the public would also use the tennis courts as well. And there's even an idea, and I think that Jared has talked a little bit about this, about having pickleball courts. Pickleball is becoming much more popular these days, and being able to utilize some of those courts for that as well. So those are the three big things, and I think an ongoing thing that we'll be talking about throughout the month of February and every month is economic development. And I want the citizens to be fully aware that the city staff, elected officials are always working on economic development projects to better the community and ensure that we have a vibrant economy. So, last and certainly not least, the major concern in February is the budget. And we have to certify the city budget in March. And who better to talk about the city budget than our finance director, Brian Weave. And I think Brian is going to talk a little bit about the budget process, maybe a little bit about how it's changed, and the different aspects of the city budget. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Brian.
Well, thank you, Mayor. As the first of the calendar year approaches and is now passed, our main focus turns into the budget. Our fiscal year, which means the year that we operate and how we budget things, runs from July 1st to the following June 30th. And so we're right halfway through our current fiscal year. And so we're now working on the fiscal year that will begin this coming July in July of 22. And there's a lot of moving pieces to it. One of the things that we're currently working on, and in fact Monday night, this coming Monday the 31st, we'll be presenting what is known as our CIP, or Capital Improvement Plan, to the council. That plan is put forth by all the departments and is kind of a roadmap for the next 5 years of what we intend to spend money on with regards to major capital projects, equipment purchases, building maintenance, things like that. And the finance staff is kind of working through that process right now. We've met with the department heads and are putting the final touches on that. But right now, I think in our 5-year plan, we've got it proposed right around $22 million worth of expenditures, and that goes all the way from major street reconstructions to, like I said, equipment purchases, et cetera. And while it seems like a lot, when you divvy it up over 5 years, it's only a couple $1 million each year. And when we look at a major street reconstruction that we have in 2 years, we have that pegged at about $2.5 million. So, they are large numbers, but you start divvying it out among everything. I think there's 130 some different projects that encompasses that things. And so what happens then is Monday night we'll present those all to the council, and barring any major objections in that, what we really look forward is consensus on the next immediate year, so the projects that we would like to accomplish in starting after July of 22. And then the other 4 years part of that plan are kind of placeholders. We review the plan every year, so there's always time to update costs and change projects. Departmental priorities may change, council priorities may change a little bit, or maybe a project's no longer needed, or we'll have had to move it up. And so that plan is reviewed every year. Then immediately following that, we go into the bigger component of the budget, which is the actual operations budget. And that's how, and those decisions are made on how we fund each and every department, how they'll operate, how much money is allocated to each one to do their function for the city and the citizens. And those are really derived and broken down into about 4 major parts. We have the general fund, which is our main operating fund, and that funds everything from police, fire, parks, library, to the administration and services like that. The streets department is included in the general fund, but is paid a little bit differently in that. Then the rest of the general fund departments, road use taxes. So every time you anytime you fill up the tank, Part of that gas price that you see on the posted is gas taxes, and the city gets a share of that for operation and maintenance of our road system. The rest of the general fund, its main property or main source of revenue is property tax. I believe for the current fiscal year, our general fund is around $7 million, and about $4.5 million of that is property tax coming in. We got another $1.5 million for streets, so that's road use tax, and then the last million or so is made up of fees, some grants, some other operating revenue. So we get some intergovernmental revenue. So you may or may not know, but the 911 dispatch center is operated by the city of Spencer, but we share the expenses with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and so it serves all of Clay County, and so then the county pays half of those expenses. So that's part of the revenue that we account for in the general fund. Our next big one is the capital projects or capital funds. Those, again, we'll take everything that we discuss as part of the capital improvement plan, and then we expend those through the capital budget. We have a debt service budget, so this is actually paying for past projects that have already been completed, but we may have had to borrow money for that, and so it's just like taking out your own loan. We'll issue debt or borrow money for projects and then pay those back over usually about a 10-year period is what we pay those back on. And the last major component of the budget is our enterprise funds. So those are those departments that operate like a business, receive no property tax dollars, and so they pay their own way through user fees or other charges. And for us, we have the solid waste department is an enterprise, the sewer department, the airport operates as an enterprise department, and the last one, which may not be well known, but the city owns the regional landfill over in Grettinger, and so that acts like that is an enterprise fund as well. And so I mean, that is, no one sees where their garbage goes except for maybe the transfer station, and then where does it go from there? Well, it goes over to our landfill in Grettinger. And then besides the city of Spencer, we serve 3 other counties, so Emmett County, Palo Alto, and Pocahontas County, and the majority of the cities in all of those. So there's a couple cities within each of those counties that may have agreements elsewhere, but otherwise that's the bulk of the service area that we serve at the landfill. As we do through budget, we review everything. We review the operations, how much each department needs. Are there things that are missing? Do they have a special project or something that's going to be abnormal that needs funding for the next year? When it comes to rates, we review rates that we charge for services, solid waste rates, sewer rates. We're actually in the midst of finishing up a formal study on both the solid waste and sewer rates. It's been a while since we've done that, and so we're looking at the rate structure we have, whether it's fair and equitable, and how we can adjust that for not only changing times and that, but to make sure that what we're charging is fair to every customer of those 2 option or enterprises. So, and as we discuss with property taxes, obviously our goal is to keep the rate as low as possible, but to provide the services to the citizens. And a lot of that depends on property values, the value of each and every one property that's in the city. Those values are not determined by the city. Those are determined by the Clay County assessor, who puts the value on it, and then the city takes that value and it creates what is known as the tax rate, and then that is part of each citizen's tax bill. However, we're not the only component of your tax bill. We are about a third of it is the city, another third is the school, about 25% is the county, and then the last 5% is some miscellaneous like Iowa Lakes Community College and some other minor fees or allocations, and that is the on your tax bill. But so when you get those every summer and you see what the amount is, you can actually see where all your money is being divvied to. Is at the bottom of those statements is a nice chart that says how much is going to the school, the city, the county, community college, and all that. So But the council does take a lot of time to discuss that and look at that because they are very aware of, well, as well as staff, is what the impact is to the community. And so we try to minimize that impact, but still keep the level of service that we have in the community. And so part of that is we spend a lot of time discussing. In fact, after we get kind of done with Monday night, our focus is on the budget. Staff has been working with the department heads, and they've submitted their budgets. We'll be reviewing those. And then the process has changed over the last couple of years. We will now present the full budget to our finance committee and give them a full look at it. In the past, we had always had each of the committees that made up the council kind of reviewed the budgets for what they oversaw. So like our public safety committee would review the police and fire budget. Public works committee would review the street and sewer and landfill and all those budgets, et cetera. And so if a council member wasn't able to attend all those committee meetings or just came to the ones that they were on, they would only see a small component or small piece of the budget. And so last year we started and we present the full budget to our finance committee. They had asked for more in-depth details of how the budget's done, what levers we pull, because as the initial budget is usually we come in and like last year we were going to have a 70-cent tax increase if we funded everything normally. And so during those deliberations, we realized that wasn't going to be feasible or doable. And so we looked at how can we buy that down? How can we lower that? Is it through cuts? Is it through use of one-time money? Things like that. And we brought it down to where last year our rate didn't change at all because of some of the uses of money we had, and then we cut some things out of the budget that had been requested, et cetera. And so that's what the finance committee spends their time on. And we spent about 4.5, 5 hours one day going through the budget and discussing some options, or 2 days to discussing options. And then we presented their recommended budget to the full council. And then we had a couple more meetings on that. So look for those to come starting in the middle of February through the end of February. All those meetings are open to the public. So if you want to spend some time learning more in depth of what goes into the budget and where your money is going to be spent for fiscal year 23, you're more than welcome to attend. In fact, we would encourage you to attend and ask questions. And then, like the mayor said, we have to adopt and certify our budget by the end of March. So we have to give it to the county by March 31st. And in both council meetings in March, we'll hold 2 different public hearings, one on what our maximum tax rate would be, and then the final one at the second meeting in March of what our actual budget is and its adoption there. So it's a large time, but the city is not. When you look at it from a business-wise, we're not necessarily a small business. I think our current budget is right in that $27 million that we are spending in the current year. So, we do look after a large amount of money and take serious of the responsibility we have to each and every one of our citizens. So, anything else?
Okay. Thank you, Brian. I think that as you just heard, Brian's job as finance director is huge, and especially this time of year, he's got a great deal of responsibility in meeting with those department heads and talking to them about their budgets, their operating budgets, but also their CIP budgets and so forth. But I just want to reiterate one thing that Brian just commented on, and that is transparency. And I think it's important that citizens understand that we don't hold any committee meetings behind closed doors. They are all open to the public, and you're certainly welcome to attend those meetings. And if you like numbers, especially, those meetings are for you. And it's really not unlike sitting around your kitchen table and planning your family budget. There's some tough decisions that have to be made, regardless of whether it's a city budget or a family budget or whatever. these are tough decisions, and they're not taken lightly. And I think that this city council is very cognizant of the fact that they are stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, and they certainly are not frivolous in their spending of those dollars. So anyway, thank you again, Brian, for presenting today. And as I said, other department heads will be guests in the future. So before I close, I have just a couple of other things that I'd like to comment on. And I want to just say that over the past several years, I think that civil discourse in our country is becoming rather coarse. And we've seen this play out in school board meetings and city council meetings throughout the country. There's been disruption and incivility and shouting and things like that. We are so fortunate here in Spencer that we have not seen that sort of thing. We have seen civility in our public meetings. And I was reading recently, I came across a quote from the former mayor of Indianola, Keenan Bresnan, and I'd just like to share that. And he said this about civility. He said, "Civility is a respect for others that requires time, presence, willingness to engage in genuine discourse, and the intention to seek common ground." And I want you to know that this has been my experience as a city council member when I served on the city council from 2004 to 2019. And since I announced my candidacy for mayor, since the election in November, and throughout this first month, what I have seen from the public and what I have seen from council members, staff members, people within the community of Spencer as a whole is civility. And I think it's important to recognize that, to recognize the civility that we do see, because it's really important that we converse with each other and we do it in a respectful manner. And I think we can disagree. We can search for common ground, but we can disagree. But what I've always said is that we can disagree with honor and dignity. So I will leave you with that. And thanks again to SMU and to everyone out there. Do good and take care.